All right, the boys are back, and do we have a stellar album to add to their catalog or another kind of mixed grab bag? Well, let's find out. Day and Age by Frost. So, Frost is one of my favorite progressive rock bands from the mid 2000s. They came onto the scene in 2006 and really shook up the landscape. I think it still does one of the best jobs of summarizing the progressive rock scene of the 2000s and being this big symphonic look back, massive jam sessions, great time signatures, a real fun album in that sense. And they followed it up with an album to stand toe to toe with them with Experiments in Mass Appeal, which I believe, if Milliontown was a look back and a summarization, Experiments in Mass Appeal was the projecting and forecasting what was coming down the turnpike. The songs were darker, sharper, punchier, shorter, a lot more concise, and a lot heavier. And I feel like Neoprog was just about to do that, and in fact has still kind of kept that scene pretty heavily from 2007 all the way through until maybe 2017, 2018. It's still one of the more prevailing sounds, and only recently are we starting to get away from this. Now, helming these, we do have Jem Gottfried being the main man, the kind of Genesis individual who's been spearheading this, as well as John Mitchell. And John Mitchell comes from such bands as It Bites. I believe he came from Arena, correct me if I'm wrong, but his big project of Lonely Robot, which I've really been enjoying. After this, they took almost a 10-year hiatus until they came out with Falling Satellites back in 2016. Wasn't a big fan of this one, if I'm being perfectly honest. Didn't really like some of the sounds that they had coming down on this one. I felt like it was good ideas executed not necessarily in the greatest way. I felt like the overall flow of the album just didn't quite click, and upon repeated listens, I'm not getting a whole lot out of it, which is a shame because you have such star performers as Joe Satriani gracing us halfway through the runtime of this. I gotta admit, that album, even though I had huge expectations for it, did let me down, and I haven't really returned to it all that often. Now, the same can't be said about the EP they released last year of Others. So these guys, they're still turning out some great music. Others from last year really surprised me. I really found myself loving it. I felt like the energy that was lacking from Falling Satellites was found on that project, and it rejuvenized my love and my expectations for what Frost can do, because I know both John and Jem can produce breathtaking music. They've proven themselves in the past. So now we come to Day and Age, their latest album that's getting released. So Day and Age, we're coming to Day and Age. Yeah, this one's interesting. This one is interesting. It doesn't compare to the first two albums of Experiments in Mass Appeal, as well as Milliontown. I just got to come right out and say that, no, it doesn't. But I do feel like this is a vast improvement of Falling Satellites, and probably a step back from Others, if I'm being perfectly honest. The songs still have that great energetic flow that Frost can deliver. It has some great grand sounds about it. Jem on the keyboards really does know how to lay down the foundations of a great soundscape, and he's really able to experiment with sounds and try new things and try different items. Now, the main standout thing is that Craig Blandell has left the band, which left quite a bit of a gap, and instead of replacing a full-time drummer, they actually hired 3 different drummers. So this is one of the few bands that actually doesn't have a drummer. So we have Pat Mastorello, Kaz Rodriguez, and Darby Todd, all filling the shoes for different drummers on this album. And in some cases, it does create a little bit of a disjointed listen because there doesn't seem to be a unifying drum sound on this album. And sometimes this works because in certain songs, you really do need this big punch of a track, like the first track of Day and Age, the title track, as well as Skyward, Kill the Orchestra, and Repeat to Fade. The last 3 tracks do need this really oomph sound about it. And then there are some tracks like Waiting for the Lie and Island Life that you need a little bit more of a subtle touch to it, a little bit less of a bombastic approach, and in that case somebody else can fill the shoes. but I do wonder what it would sound like if they only had the one drummer. Coming into this album and actually going through and listening to it, it does provide, much like Fallen Satellites, a little bit of a mixed grab bag. Like, there are certain tracks that I really do love off this album, and I feel it brings a new breath and a new facet to the band. It provides a really interesting flavor of music. The first one being Day and Age, almost at 12 minutes. I love the odyssey of sound that we have on here. It opens up with a spoken word from a little girl. And remember to enjoy yourselves, you scum. And this is a phrase that's repeated a couple of times through the track listing. So Day and Age is a great track. It opens up with a big blast of sound, some really energetic playing styles between Jem and John on the keyboards and guitar work. I think it does a really great job of laying down the foundations of this. Terrestrial, I feel is much more of a generic track, and honestly I don't feel all that excited about it. It wasn't until really Waiting for the Lie that I really like the sounds and soundscapes of this. I love how they build it up more towards itself. I love how the general climb of this track leads to a very satisfying crescendo by the end of it, and it provides, as I mentioned about Day and Age, it provides a really nice journey. The Boy Who Stood Still, the middle track of this, is a really interesting one because it's a blending of spoken word and singing, and I'm not quite sure if I really like the actual story behind this. It's essentially Drax, the Destroyer from Guardians of the Galaxy.
I've mastered the ability of standing so incredibly still that I've become invisible to the eye.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, it's interesting. I wonder why they chose to have a spoken word instead of having it be a sung thing. The music itself, though, is still top notch, and I still really enjoy the musical structure of this. But because it's the only track on here that has the spoken word outside of the title track, which just kind of opens up the album, I don't know, it kind of drew me out and really made me like not appreciate the music that was going on, which is a little bit of a shame because this might be the best music that they've produced within the past 8 years. From there we go into Island Life, which again I feel much like Terrestrial doesn't really do too much. It doesn't add any new item or concept or feel to the rest of the album. It just kind of is there. It isn't really until we get to Skywards, Kill the Orchestra, and Repeat the Fade, the last 3 tracks, that I really get invested in this album and really enjoy the sounds that are coming through. I love these 3 tracks. They kind of rekindled that love that others already stoked for the fire. Skyward is a great punchy track. I think it does a great job of really bringing back the listener into the album. Like, it starts off very somber and very quiet, very similar to Waiting for the Lie, and in some cases it does feel a little bit of a repeat, but what I really enjoy is that big crescendo and that big massive sound that Jem is creating on the keyboards and the synthesizers. You can tell that like a production value, and as a producer, Jem really knows what he's doing behind the keyboards and behind the scenes. And I really enjoy that big sound that he's able to do, that it's this massive soundscape on there, and how it goes right into Kill the Orchestra, which is the second longest track off of this. That might be my favorite track. It might be my favorite track outside of Day and Age. Part of that does have to do with the reprisal of a number of moments and phrases from Day and Age. It almost feels as though this really should have been the final track off of the album, or they should have saved some of those reprisals of themes and put it into Fade to Repeat. Because really, Kill the Orchestra is that great sounds that I loved from Frost, and it's reminiscing of Experiments in Mass Appeal and some of the better parts from Falling Satellites, where again, much like Skyward, it starts off very somber and very soft and then slowly builds to this really gnarly crescendo where John on the guitars is providing the really interesting atmospheres for Jem to overlay the keyboards on. And then we come to the last track of Repeat to Fade, which I've already mentioned is a stellar track off of this album. I love how punchy it is, how energetic it is. It took all that energy from the last couple of tracks and really synthesized it into an essence of the track, and I love that punch. You can definitely feel one of those drummers is the powerhouse of this, and I just wish that more of that flavor could have been found throughout the album overall. So yeah, I think it was a great way of kind of summarizing the album, even though I do feel as though some of those reprisals that we heard on Kill the Orchestra would have been put on this track rather than Kill the Orchestra, just to make it a little bit more of a bookend. Overall, Day and Age was better than I had expected, but also kind of where I thought they would be. It's definitely like streets ahead of Falling Satellites, but I still feel like the music that they put out from the Others EP is far superior and far better. But I mean, it's still a great time. If you're a fan of Frost, especially if you really like the output from Falling Satellites, you're going to really, really dig this. But unfortunately, it seems as though their first two albums really still are their best works. So this is one that I would probably download. Like, there's still enough on here to write home about. There's still quite a number of really, really tasty jams on here. Like I mentioned, the Day and Age track, the title track, as well as the last three tracks really do provide a stellar work of music. It's just those middle tracks that kind of waver in terms of quality. So yeah, that's what I've really got for Day and Age by Frost. What did you guys think? Did you love this album? Did you hate this album? Are you somewhere kind of in between? Let me know by commenting down below. And if you like what you see and you want to help support me, consider donating to my Patreon. I've left that link down below for you to check out. Even $1 a month, it does help this guy out quite a bit. And check out some of my other stuff that I've got going on. I've got my podcast of Quid Pro Quo. It's also here on YouTube if you're not a podcast person. And I've got my Tabletop Role PG that I've left the link down below. If you want to hear me talking about some strange tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm putting out a new video for the game Paranoia that I'm pretty excited about. And yeah, that's all I've got. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.